an unwelcome collision with reality. I believe that this one session will suffice to provide you with a meaningful assessment upon which you can then doubtless ruminate, Mr. Ravenscroft. We psychoanalysts do not believe simple, cursory diagnoses mean much of anything at all, invented, as they are, only for the benefit of venal insurance companies. Nor do we make simple flavour of the weak pronouncements, as you might likely have suspected. I will tell you the truth as I see it, and I do see it quite clearly, in a way that you, as a layman, can easily understand. You are in such an infantile rage over your feelings of having been short-changed by your parents that you have transformed your petty, spiteful, hopefully regressed fury into a religion of nihilism. Yes, of course. There is no question that your parents abused you, while simultaneously overprotecting you and stuffing you full to bursting with contradictory feelings of grandiosity, inferiority, and terror. That is not hard to see, had it not ever occurred either to you or to any of your previous therapists. Was there no one before me who saw all your anger for what it was and remains? The sadism of a little boy who was subjected to disingenuous displays of affection which alternated rapidly and unpredictably with physical and psychological violence? A little boy who now, unsurprisingly, takes pleasure in torturing his peers? He's never quite sure why, only that it feels right, for they all have, somehow, even if he can't pinpoint or quantify that somehow wronged him. No matter. This dreadful feeling within him, these thousands of hatpins stuck long ago in his flesh, point unequivocally in his mind to their guilt. All of them, without exception. On rare occasions, that little boy encounters someone who seems sufficiently damaged and vulnerable, and, as a result, his milder instincts, his empathy, and, dare I say it, even his long-ago crushed, castrated instinct to love is evoked. But this never lasts. It can never last. Why? Because there are no people who are simply that, and nothing besides, simply damaged and vulnerable, and hence dependably alluring. The moment this one-dimensionally vulnerable person's complexity begins to emerge, the project is abandoned, ending inescapably in displays of the little boy's fear or condemnation as regards the formerly potential love object, which was so deeply attractive just moments before. This little boy, who was and who remains so full of passions of all sorts, all of them sickly, mangled and perverse, and who apparently hasn't even begun to put two and two together. And so that little boy continues to seek out these sorts of seemingly vulnerable strangers, the ones whom he also knows, in addition to being initially appealing, will present no challenge, because that little boy also was and remains a coward. And, as I said a moment ago, the denouement for him, and, more often than not for them, is always disastrous. He's always been, and is still, afraid to stick his neck out, to see if he has any talent worthy of being praised by those who would know perfectly well whether or not this is the case. He's afraid to go in the big boy pool, as it were. But then, why should he? When he can live the cloistered, grandiose life of the condescending, self-important, idealistic, I'm a legend in my own mind, loner. So now we have both of those little boys' reasons, excuses, and defense mechanisms, each of which helps enable and encourage him to consistently choose to stick his head in the sand and to live such a hopelessly circumscribed life. The safe haven of the house of cards in which he lives, which he has taken great time and great care to construct, and his cowardice. You being that little boy, avoid it in the end, because you have a way and lifestyle and inner familiar chatter which makes it possible, and because you are utterly unable to follow through on it because of your faint-heartedness. It is simply too terrifying for you. And hence, as it has in the past, and as it will continue to do so, until your final hour, everything inevitably crashes and burns. You retreat into the hurt and vitriolic posture of the wounded child, and you are, once again, submerged by no one's hands other than your own in a pool of hydrochloric acid, choking and gagging on your feelings of loneliness, inferiority, and self-loathing. All of your nobler, braver instincts, although the latter are in somewhat short supply, vanish in a heartbeat. And, eventually and inevitably, a counterfeit fortress arises, erected against the real enemy, which you pretend is in the hearts and minds of others, but which, ultimately, is yourself, and yourself only. And this you are, to your credit, willing to admit, at least now and then, when you are forced, or force yourself, to look inwards with some modicum of honesty. But you never dare to linger there. You have not truly arrived at this pogo-like state of self-awareness, at least consistently, in which you recognize the enemy as yourself. You see yourself as the cut-off point for the worthy versus the worthless. You always have. Those to whom you feel superior are swine, lacking justification to draw breath. Those to whom you feel inferior are terrifying. They hold the fearsome potential of doing you in with a single, incisively pointed assessment. Those to whom you feel more or less equivalent are granted, in your mind, tentatively, but only tentatively, the right to exist. What kind of man is it that seeks every opportunity to keep risk and challenge at bay, who inevitably chooses the most expedient, comfortable course at every turn, and who constantly obsesses about his ongoing decay and imminent demise, as if they are both demons which hover just behind him, whose foul, rancid breaths choke any and every course of action he might consider initiating, who feels every compliment must be either an agenda-filled lie or the confirmation of the stupidity of its giver, who finds only rejection appealing and true. Yes, yes. Your mother smothered you with praise you knew was a sham one moment, and then beat you down the next, literally and figuratively, and yet another person would have come out of all that very differently. You are made of very weak stuff, Mr. Ravenscroft. And so you have developed, not consciously, but nevertheless quite meticulously, a kind of battle plan for life, for those times when you are forced to interact with the world at large. You operate from a very deep belief that if you can convince everyone that their ideals and priorities are lies and defences, that then, and only then, when you have succeeded in chopping them down to your size, and they, of necessity, begin to feel what it is that you constantly feel, that they will then be able to join you where you are, in the void. The empty, lonely void in which you've existed for as long as you can recall, since your consciousness first winked into existence as a toddler, and that maybe, or so you fantasize, you might potentially have a basis on which to develop a real rapport with another human being. It is lonely living on the head of a pin, is it not, Mr. Ravenscroft? You are very accomplished at this chopping of others down to size. Chop, chop, chop. It feels good, yes? And you are quite accomplished at it. The truth is, you'd be a very good cult leader if you had charisma and something to offer your disciples in return. But you haven't a shred of charisma, and it is far from clear that you have something, indeed anything at all, to offer in return. And yet still, your goal is clear. You strive mightily to get these others to share your emptiness and despair. It is your fondest wish and goal, and you are sufficiently intelligent to realize that your tactical arsenal for achieving said goals are often insufficient. Hence you are constantly reading, enlisting aid from the written words of other pessimists and nihilists, far more intelligent pessimists and nihilists. And yet, you would throw all of that over in a heartbeat if only you could stand next to a beautiful woman and feel her love, accept it, trust it, believe in it, drink it in. And much, much more importantly than that, though equally impossible, if you could feel any sort of real love for her in return. Not just a hint of that love, which disappears the moment you are frightened or challenged, that you have felt many times. I'm referring to the real thing, experienced in an ongoing way. I'm afraid the potential for that was strangled long ago, in your very early years, more likely during your infancy, in your crib. The sad truth is that you will never see, have, or experience any of this. You will die a bitter, beaten dog. By the way, now that we are speaking of dogs, you claim to love your dog, and I believe you. But it's more than a little easy to love a dog. A dog is a pathetic, pea-brained creature who is nothing other than naked need and quite incapable of discernment. We bred all good sense out of wolves long ago. What is left is a bucket into which we pour our projections, a sad, needy puppet we humans have created. You do have something of a heart for the vulnerable, the pathetic, those incapable of challenging or criticizing you, and, at some moments, even something resembling real empathy, which we both know full well is only self-love by another name. But the moment this vulnerable love object, upon whom you are showering your projections, needs, and self-love, speaks up for itself, shows a hint of independence, or, perish the thought, has the audacity to challenge you, even mildly, you either flee in terror or unleash a torrent of unwarranted vitriol. This has been, and will always be, your character, the artificial fabric of your life. Were your dog to do so, to defy you, or to simply display some modest amount of independence, the result would be precisely the same. That you were betrayed, that you were cheated on by two of your significant girlfriends early in your romantic life is no surprise. You must have been asking for it. You might as well have worn a t-shirt advertising your raw naked need, your hair trigger rage at the slightest hint of rejection, your inability to trust, your expectation that you would be betrayed, and your admittedly well-earned misogyny. It would have been hard for either of them to have missed that, at least eventually. We needn't see one another again, but do take care to recall, you are too frightened of death to consider suicide. You must remember your true nature. You are, first and foremost, a coward. And let us conclude on a final note of what has been, perhaps, my too ruthless honesty, for which I apologize, although I have found it very hard to refrain from it in your case. There is still so much bittersweet emptiness, self-loathing and sadism for you to taste before this Mr. Death arrives, over whom you constantly obsess, is there not? He who will one day either gradually or quite immediately rip your guts apart and make you worm food. Don't you want to hang around and indulge yourself on the ongoing feast of barren solitude and savagery which is your life? It's the only food you have ever had or ever will have a taste for. There always has been, and always will be, an abundance of these sorts of delicacies at your table. I suggest you at least attempt to enjoy them. Good day, Mr. Ravenscroft.